Hi, I'm Chris Mazzola Wood, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and the author of Setting Boundaries, 100 Ways to Protect Yourself, Strengthen Your Relationships, and Build the Life You Want starting now. Today I want to speak with you about what exactly boundaries are in relationships. And this is a great question because there's actually numerous layers to what boundaries are in a relationship. First, I want to say that boundaries exist in every type of relationship. And so everything I discuss in this video is going to be applicable to different types of relationships in your life, whether they're work, with family, friends, or romantic partners. And boundaries, as very essentially in any relationship, are going to be any limit that you need to set to feel safe in that relationship and to be safe in that relationship. Of course, safety is both literal. There are things that literally endanger our safety, and of course, it's incredibly necessary to expect a lack of physical abuse, for example, in relationships. Like, that's a very fundamental boundary. We need safety, we need to be protected, our body. And then also boundaries and these limits are going to be more emotional or mental a lot of the time as well. For example, you might not want to be yelled at in a relationship. That's a boundary you might need to set to feel safe with your partner or with a family member. And boundaries also are both external. These are the limits that you're setting with other people, not to feel safe with them, no yelling, for example. But these are also the limits that you're setting on yourself, these internal limits, to be safe for other people. So external limits are those limits that we set with others to feel safe with them, to make sure they're treating us with respect. And then internal limits are those limits that we set on ourselves to be safe for other people. So if you've ever wanted to yell at someone but then didn't, you set an internal limit on yourself. Whether that was conscious or not, you still chose to contain yourself so that you could be safe for that other person. Of course, you probably used a coping skill as well, like taking a deep breath, but boundary setting was involved in that. Also, there are internal limits that you set with yourself to be a safe person for you. And setting these limits helps you build a sense of self-esteem, self-love, self-respect, even if those things are kind of shaky for you right now. So you can build your boundaries to learn how to love yourself even if you don't yet, which is super cool about boundary setting. And so an example of one of these internal limits to be safe for you could be, you had a horrible day at work and your impulse is to, have one too many glasses of wine, but you know that you're gonna wake up hungover, which will make you kind of feel depressed and irritable all day, which will make it even more likely that that poor mood is going to continue, that you won't have a good day again. And so you set a limit on yourself not to get that bottle of wine on your way home from work, and instead you take a bubble bath and you go to bed early. That would be an internal limit. Or setting a limit on yourself to go to bed instead of scrolling some more because you have to wake up in the morning. There's many ways that we can set internal limits on ourselves, and that's really the practice of self-care. And so with these external and internal limits, when you're in every relationship in your life, it's really about identifying where and when you might not feel safe. Cues to what your boundaries are going to be are if you feel angry, frustrated, overwhelmed, taken advantage of. Any of those emotions kind of highlight that you might need a limit here to feel safe with other people or with yourself. The process of identifying your boundaries is complex, but the most important thing is to really kind of pay attention to those cues: anger, irritation, frustration, helplessness, all of those things. And then to really figure out what your authentic needs and values are. For example, if you are waiting for a friend for lunch and you notice that this friend always runs late, and here you are waiting for them still 20 minutes after you said you would meet, and you're feeling super annoyed, you probably need a limit to set a boundary around your time in this friendship. So perhaps you let them know that you love them and you need your time respected. So in the future, if they're running more than 10 minutes late, you're going to have to leave because you really need your time respected. And that's the other part of boundary setting that's so important, that's often not discussed, which is boundaries are meaningless without consequences, unless you actually follow through on what will be the consequence you say will happen if you set a consequence. Unless you follow through, you're teaching people that your boundaries don't need to be respected. So super important to follow through and to not really set limits until you're ready to set those consequences. And not to shame yourself if you're not ready. It's okay. You know, I love this quote by Melody Beatty, who says that we won't set a limit until we're ready, and there's something magical about getting to that point of being ready. I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but that's the gist of it. And so with these internal and external limits to be safe with other people, we really need to tune into our authentic self, our authentic needs. So your boundaries in a relationship are going to be different probably than what your mom needs or your best friend or someone else might need. And instead of feeling like you shouldn't need or want certain things in your relationship, it's really important to just be honest with yourself. You know, there's a lot of boundary setting that needs to happen as well with our culture. Maybe you picked up all these ideas that you should always be working, that you're lazy if you take breaks or vacations. And so you can set boundaries to be a safe person for yourself and your mental wellness and your physical wellness. And tell yourself that, you know, maybe to start with, once or twice a week, you're not going to bring work home with you. And so that's a limit you can start setting to be safe for yourself. And that's kind of around work. That's around, you know, cultural messages around productivity and worth. And, you know, as I'm sharing all these examples, I hope you're noticing that boundary setting is complicated. And so if you've ever struggled with it at all, please know that's completely natural. I've worked with people in behavioral health for my entire career, and I've never met one person who didn't struggle with boundaries, at least in one area of their life at some time. So please be gentle with yourself. Give yourself grace. Learning to set meaningful boundaries and protect yourself in a way that feels really authentic takes time and practice, and it's an ongoing experience in our lives. We're never done setting boundaries. Our boundaries evolve, our needs evolve. It just becomes more natural, easier to identify, clearer to set those boundaries. We give ourselves more grace. We accept when people are safe for us or not safe. It just becomes easier, but we're never done. And so finally, I just want to say that there are very common boundary issues that manifest, and these are going to be kind of having all or nothing boundaries. So ideally, we want our boundaries to kind of act as like a healthy, flexible bubble. And so depending on that relationship or how we're feeling, we can kind of give or pull back a little bit. So maybe I'm, let my friend know that I need my time respected. That's a limit. It's my bubble. Like, I need that respected. But then, they've been respecting my time. And then in the future, they're running late and they give me a heads up because their, kid is sick. And, they had to take them to the doctor. And so maybe I can be flexible there because they've been respecting my boundary. It's a legitimate reason. They're not giving me excuses all the time anymore. And so I can be a little flexible here. Or I have the boundary in my life not to bring work home with me, but I'm really excited about a project that I'm finishing up on. I have the opportunity for a bonus if I get it in on time. And so I'm going to make the exception that week just to bring work home with me, just because for this week, I want to, finish that project. But then I'm going to go back to that limit around not bringing work home with me. And so if you notice, though, that you struggle with your boundaries, completely natural. And typically these are going to be more porous boundaries, kind of like nothing. This experience is kind of like if you find yourself to be a people pleaser or having symptoms of codependency, where you're trying to keep other people happy without really asking yourself what you need or want or what makes you feel safe. Or they're going to be like extreme, like walled off boundaries where you have a hard time letting people know things about you. You really struggle to be vulnerable. Maybe people think you're a great listener, but really it's because you're not willing to share anything about yourself. And, I want you to have compassion for the fact that whether you have porous boundaries or really walled off boundaries or kind of a combination depending on the setting, that these all or nothing boundaries were created for a reason. We develop all or nothing boundaries to feel safe. We're trying to feel safer. And different experiences or the same experience can actually impact us in different ways. So maybe one person was bullied growing up and now they have porous boundaries. They're more of a people pleaser because they think that if they let other people know what they need or what their boundaries are, they're going to be rejected for sure, that they're a burden, so they better have no boundaries to keep people around. On the other side, someone who is bullied might think people aren't safe, I can't trust other people, and so they're going to build up a wall. Maybe these are people are workaholics, or sometimes it happens where they abuse substances, and they're just really, maybe they have avoidant attachment. This is more anxious attachment with the porous boundaries. Avoidant attachment where they just can't really be vulnerable or intimate in their relationships. And if you relate on either side, please have compassion for yourself. It happened for a reason. It makes sense, and know you can get to the healthy middle. You can learn how to be safe with other people, how to trust trustworthy people while protecting yourself and feeling really rooted in your right to healthy boundaries, but also the need to be vulnerable and intimate with people so you can be close to them, kind of that middle ground, that Venn diagram. And for today, I want you to just notice that if you at all struggle with your boundaries, whether they're porous or walled off, I want you to just take a moment to honor that it makes sense. If you want to journal about this, a journal prompt could be, what are my boundary concerns right now? Is it more all or nothing, or is it kind of a combination? And if so, when and where? Like maybe I have porous boundaries when I'm dating people, or and I am really walled off with my friends. That's just an example. And then really give yourself a moment to honor why you feel like you have to give up your boundaries or build a wall up to feel safe. Of course it has its, pains, because you're kind of taking advantage of if you don't have boundaries, or you're lonely if you are behind a wall all the time. But I want you to just validate why it makes sense. It is understandable when you look at your life, and I want you to just have compassion for it, knowing that you can absolutely develop healthier boundaries. And many of my videos are going to address exactly how to develop healthy boundaries, how to set them, how to identify them, maintain them, all of that. But for now, give yourself compassion, and it's one step at a time. It's been lovely chatting with you, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.